Hey guys, it's Adam from Premium Poker Tools, and I'd like to kind of walk you through the things that you can do in the settings. So it's kind of broken down into general things that apply to everything, um, things that apply to the equity calculator, and then things that apply to the hit calculator. So let's start off with hand rankings. So before I click on it, I just want to show you um, when you have the slider and you drag to add hands, it's going to do so based on a certain ordering. It's adding pocket nines before it adds 7 to offsuit because nines are better. So there's a certain ordering here. So if you go to the settings and then the hand rankings, you can have different orders. So if you click these links, it's going to tell you like what the order is for each of them. Um, yeah, so you can try out, let's say, Sklansky Chubukov, and you have to click save. So now when we go and we click to add hands, it's going to do so in a different order. And maybe you can notice it looks like this ordering is very pocket pair heavy and very aces heavy. Before it looked like, Queen Jack suited was being added before pocket threes, and King Queen off was being added first. So because we changed the hand ranking, the ordering is going to be different. And if you click the help section, it's going to, go over some things a little bit more. It's going to talk about how each of these things decides to order hands. Um, it's going to talk about the fact that there's no correct answer, there's no right answer to the way that you rank the hands. It's very situation dependent. So, like 9-8 suited is a good hand to bluff with, and it's a good hand for multi-way pots because you can make like a flush or a straight. Whereas if you're heads up or you're all in or something, 9-8 suited isn't very good, but ace 8 offsuit is good because it has the ace. So yeah, hands. It depends a lot on the situation. There's no right answer to how you rank hands. Um, so one last thing is that if you don't like any of these orderings, you can do your own. So you can go like aces, kings, queens, jacks, whatever. Um, you can do your own ordering, but just make sure that you go here and you follow these rules. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. So that was what the hand rankings mean. So now let's talk about the saved ranges. So we have these kind of shortcut ways to select hands. So the ones that you can see right now, these are kind of the defaults that come with the app. We have kind of some opening ranges, we have some 3-betting ranges from different positions, we have some flat calling ranges from different positions, and just a quick comment, what this means is like, so these come from Ed Miller's recommendations in the course. It's a book, and he says to 3-bet only these combos when you're against a tight open. But if you think that your opponent is opening with a loose range, you can add in these hands. So tight and loose, that's kind of the range of the opener. And I'll include a link to that in the description. So anyway, these are the saved ranges that come with the app. But if you go to settings, saved ranges, you can adjust them. So like if you want your open range from the button to include all of the offsuit aces, you can do that. Click save. And now when you go here and you click open from the button, it's going to include this stuff right here. And not only can you adjust these ranges, but you can add them. So like here we only have ranges from the button cutoff and early position in the blinds, but like let's say that we want to have a range from the hijack, so we can go here, We can add a sibling. Um, we can double click this and call this like the hijack. And then we can say, like, what do we think they're opening with from the hijack? So, cutoff is 22%. Here's 14%, so maybe like 18% of hands or something they're opening from the hijack. So we do that and we click save, and now we go over here and we click hijack and we have this new range. And another way to get to that place is to click here, and you can have a field day. You can spend hours and hours creating different ranges. The help section will kind of go into some more detail. Just to point some things out, like we have open 3-bet and flat call, but I don't know, if you want to have a limping range, you can click these dots and say add sibling, and we can call this the limping ranges, and then we can add children and say, like, what are we limping with from early position, what are we limping with from middle position, what are we limping with from late position. And then we can do something like this and say what we're limping with. And I'm not going to go through that time, but let's just pick something random for each of these. Early position, whatever, and we click save. Oh, I think we screwed something up. Anyway, let's see if that worked. So now we have our limping ranges. So we click this, we click this, we click this. Yeah, so I just wanted to show you that you're not limited to these, these three. You can create your own categories too. So yeah, you can spend a lot of time creating saved ranges. They can really speed up the time you spend using the app, so you don't have to do the same things over and over again. So I think you guys should definitely take the time to create your own saved ranges. Cool, so that was saved ranges. So similarly, if we look at the tiers, we have, tier 1 is jacks plus and ace king suited, but like maybe you want to include ace king offsuit in tier 1. So you can go to customize the tiers and you can add that in, and I guess remove it from tier 2 as well. So now we go down and click save, and we go back to the equity calculator, and now when we go and let's say we click tier 1, it's going to add ace king offsuit, and tier 2, it's not going to include ace king offsuit. So the default tiers, they come from, I think I have it in the help section, yeah. So if you click this link, David Sklansky kind of came up with what he considers like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So that's where the defaults come from. But you can adjust it. Alright, so that was the tiers. So now we have the included selectors. So what does that mean? So it used to mean different things, but now it only means which slider selector do you want to use. So there's 3 options. The default is what I call the log slider, and it looks like this. Another option is what I call the double slider, and it looks like this. And the third option is the single slider, and it looks like this. So let's kind of go through each of them. So the log slider, you can see that the interval from like 0 to 5 is a lot bigger than the interval from like 30 to 35. And the reason is, like, let's say that they're flatting up to 30%, and you think that they're 3-betting the top like 3% hands. Well, when you're trying to do that, like, you kind of need fine-grained control over this section right here. And on the other hand, if you think they're as wide as like 40 or 45 or something, like, you know, it's not that big a deal if it's 43 versus 45. You don't need such fine grain control over here. So now let's compare that to the double slider. And we save, and we go back. So now let's say we wanted to do that again. We say up to 30% and like the top three. Like now it's a little bit more difficult to kind of control the top of the range that we're trying to remove. So that's kind of the difference between the log slider and the double slider. And yeah, just to make it clear, this leftmost part, it's removing like the top of the range. So now if we go to the single slider, this one is the most basic. So now, you know, this one, you can't remove the top of the range. It's just one control. And what I kind of like about this is that, you know, as you click to add things, you see this guy move. So it kind of, I don't know, it's a little bit more visual way of seeing what percent of hands are in range. With the two double sliders, there's a little number that shows you it, but I kind of like to see this guy move. But ultimately, I think this is kind of an inferior option because there are a lot of situations where you want to remove like the top of someone's range. So I'm going to go back and put the log slider as my choice. And now let's go to visual. So this kind of lets you kind of say how you want the app to look like visually. So here we have what color do you want the grid squares to be. So you can see the two options are multicolored and then all green. So I want to talk about this. So multicolored is kind of more standard. We have red for the offsuit, green for the suited, and gray for the pocket pairs. And I think a lot of people are used to this. In my kind of user research, everyone I've talked to prefers this. But an alternative is what I'm calling green grid squares. So here, the color doesn't change based on the, like, whether it's offsuit, pocket pair, or suited. The color is always going to be green, but the way the color changes is based on the weight of the hands. So or like the number of combos. So let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, so let's add some hands. And you can see that the offsuit hands are much darker than the suited hands. And I think that this is a much more honest way of displaying things, because if you look, there's 12 combos of ace-king offsuit, whereas there's only 4 combos of ace-king suited. So to show that ace-king offsuit is a lot darker than ace-king suited, and when you kind of glance at the grid, you can kind of have a more honest idea of how the range is distributed. You can see that there's kind of a lot of offsuit stuff and there's not as much suited stuff. Whereas if you kind of go to the default, you know, they're all the same shade, so it looks like there's like a lot more suited hands than offsuit hands, when in reality there's a lot more offsuit hands. So also just to show you, it's not only the number of combos. Like if we go here and we say that the weight is like only 35%, well now if we kind of zoom in, you can see the shade of this is like equal to the shade of Queen Jack suited. So the shade is determined, 1 by the number of combos and 2 by the weight. So let's just see Queen Jack suited. If we decrease the weight there, now it's even lighter. So the shade is really telling you kind of what proportion is in range. So that was a long way of saying what the advantages and disadvantages of each of these are. And I'm going to go back to the default. Okay, so now there's kind of two options here. One, to not show the number of combos in range, and two, to just always show the number of combos in range. So you can see like 12 combos of king jack off, 6 of pocket queens, 4 of jack 10 suited. So here, if you choose this option, it's always going to show you the number of combos. Here it's not. And I guess kind of the advantages and disadvantages here. This is a little bit more crowded. It kind of it's a lot more stuff kind of on the screen. And I mean, I guess the advantage is that you can see the combos. So I guess different people have different preferences. My preference is to kind of have a cleaner screen and not to see them. I think that when you get more familiar with poker, you just know the combos. So yeah, that's your choice here. And finally, these are all YouTube videos. I'm offline, so you can't see, but we have some different options here. So let's go to the equity calculator. So what's going on here, it's referring to this right here, the weight to apply it to added hands. So the default is just a simple slider. You know, when it's set to 70, when you click things, it's going to add them with a weight of 70. But your other options, I'll show you what they are. So I'm going to click this and you'll see what this does. So now there's kind of like preset things. So instead of sliding it to 25, you can just click like 25, or you can just click 75. So if you want to add, these are all the things that have a weight of 100. Now I'm going to add some stuff with a weight of 75. And now I'm going to add some stuff with a weight of 25. So maybe this is like a little bit more convenient than actually sliding it. That's kind of your preference. I think it's a little silly, but that's what this option does. And then here, you'll see what this does. So now it's kind of hidden. Like if you don't set the weight a lot, maybe you don't want the screen to be crowded by it. So what you can do is like you kind of go about things normally. And if you actually want to set the weight, you go up here, set weight to apply to added hands, and you can say, I want it to be 75. So I guess the advantage here is that it kind of makes the screen a little bit less crowded. And the disadvantage is that if you're someone who is setting the weight a lot, it's like more clicking to get to the point of doing that. So now I'm going to go back and set it for the default. Okay, so now let's go to the settings. So we talked about all of these things which are kind of more general. So now I want to talk about the things that apply to the equity calculator. So the first one is the rake and tip. So let's go here. If we say like aces versus kings, it's going to be 80-20 about. And you can see that this and this add up to 100. And that's because we're not taking into account rake and tip. So when we take into account the fact that the casino is going to take a rake, and like that kind of, you can think of it as if that's the casino's equity. It's like there's another player in the pot and they have a little bit of equity almost. So, you know, they're not going to add up to 100 because you guys are paying some amount to the casino. And the tip too, like the tip is almost like the dealer's equity. So you have to subtract that stuff out. And rather than you doing that yourself, you can set things here. So you can say, they're raking 7% up to like $4, let's say, and in a $100 pot, I'm gonna give like a $2 tip. We save that. So now when we have aces versus kings, instead of 82, now we're down to like 76, let's say, because that factored in the rake and the tip. So that's pretty straightforward. I'm gonna set it back to the default of nothing. Now, the number of simulations. So by default, when you click simulate, it's going to run 25,000 simulations. And you can see it's pretty precise. It's, let's say, so 82, 81.5, 82.14, 81.6, 81.96. So it's within about 0.5% or so. It doesn't vary that much, and it's pretty quick, so I think that's kind of a good default. But if you want it to be faster, let's say we make it like 10,000. So now it's only going to run 10,000 simulations, and it's going to be a little faster. So by setting the number of simulations, you're kind of making the trade-off of like how fast is it versus how precise is it. So I'm going to set it back to the default, and now let's go to the insights. So we have this insights section here. So what this is saying is, I'm going to actually show you over here. So let's take a new situation. Let's say we have pocket jacks against like this range. Let's give them a little bit stronger of a range. Okay, so we have 42% equity. So what this is telling us here is that if we have 1-to-1 pot odds, we need to win 50% of the time. We need 50% equity, and we only have 42, so we have less than we need. So this is red, and there's an X, so it's saying like we can't call when we have 1-to-1 pot odds. But for 3-to-2 pot odds, we only need 40% equity, and we have more than that, so it's going to be green, saying that we can call. So yeah, if you don't like this section right here, you can go to settings, insights, and hide it, and you won't have that kind of bothering you, I guess. But I think a lot of people like that section. So now let's move on to the hit calculator. So in the hit calculator, what we're doing is we're saying, how does this range hit the board? So we have all of these checkboxes here, and some of the settings are going to let us adjust them. So now let's go to the settings. So here we can set which checkboxes are included. So like, let's say that we don't even want to deal with royal flushes, straight flushes, four of kinds. We just don't care about that. We can uncheck them and then save it. And now when we go to the hit calculator, we don't even see them. So it's kind of a little bit cleaner of a view. So that's one of the things that you can do. I'm going to reset it. So collapsed by default. So let's talk about that. So if we look at the hit calculator, the pairs are uncollapsed. So you can see kind of all of the things that are children of the pair category. Whereas four of a kind plus, those are collapsed by default. And like flushes are collapsed by default. So what you can do in the settings is you can say like, I want the flushes to be uncollapsed by default. So you can go up here and go here, and you can say flushes, I don't want them to be collapsed. So we unclick this, and let's say flush draws too, we don't want that to be collapsed. So now when we save and go back, by default, these things are expanded. So if you are really interested in like the distinction between a nut and a second nut, third nut, weak flush, then you can keep this expanded. Okay, so I'm going to reset that. Now let's go to the filters. So I'm going to first show you what I mean here. So actually, let's just refresh. Okay, so let's just kind of do something here. Let's just say like 30%. We're going to set a board. I'm going to make this a 3, let's say. And okay, so we have this right here. So set checkboxes. So what this is going to do is it's going to set the checkboxes to like what a tight opponent would continue with, or what like a loose opponent would continue with. But let's say you don't like this, like you have kind of a range that you are always entering in. Instead of having to enter it in each time, you can kind of save it. So we go here to filters and we add filter. And let's say that you're always entering in, like, let's say your game is really loose, you know, you're entering in all pairs down to weak pairs, and like all draws down to like 2 overcards, let's say. So let's call this like a loose range. We save it. Now when we go to the hit calculator, let's clear them. So now you can click this, and our user-defined filter, the loose filter, you can do that. So again, this kind of saves you some time. If you find yourself always entering in the same range, you just do that. Okay, so again, similar to the equity calculator, you can set the number of simulations, so I won't go over that. And lastly, we have this insight section similar to the equity calculator, and you can decide whether to show or hide it. So I'll show you what I mean. So a lot of times you will be using the hit calculator to see how often they're going to continue and whether you can bluff profitably. So what this is saying is that a half pot bluff needs to work 33% of the time to be immediately profitable. But here it's only going to work like 28%, so it's less than 33. So a half pot bet won't work versus this continuing range. Whereas a 1/3 pot bet, if they're continuing with the same range, that only needs to work 25, but it's going to work like 28, so we have the green check mark to show that this will be immediately profitable. But if you don't want to see that section, you can go here and you can decide to hide it. So that's been kind of an overview of the settings. I just wanted to kind of do this for you guys so you don't have to click and play around yourself. You can kind of see my walkthrough. I think that there's some things in here that might be pretty useful to you. Probably the saved ranges is probably the most useful. You might want to play around with the rake and the tip. You might want to have different numbers of simulations. So yeah, hopefully this has been a useful overview. My email is azerner3@gmail.com if you guys have any questions, and I hope you enjoyed the video.